Well, greetings, everyone. It is the People-Centered Internet call for the 19th of February. Glad to have you with us. This is one of our open mic sessions and delighted to have you with us. What we'll do is we'll kind of go around with topics that you might want to bring up, and then I'll stage it so that we have good chunks of time for all the topics that people are bringing to the table, and then we'll get underway. Let me just see here. I'm doing all the functions today, including letting people in. So if you'll, if I'm distracted from time to time, you'll know that that's why. And we'll thank
Kevin,
Casey
if you want to make me co-host, I'll monitor that if you want.
Okay, let me just see here. Done. You are now co-host. Let some people in, my friend. All right, so let's just get a few topics that you might have on the table, and then we'll start to move around and see what kind of concentric orbits we get. Do you have any things that you brought to the table that you want to discuss during our open mic today? Yes, Mark.
I just want to say hi to Frank. I've read your posts, Frank, and I have a lot of things that we should discuss. And maybe the best way would be to have a Zoom offline. If you send me your email in the chat, I'll send you a Zoom invite. It's places where I think it would be fruitful to talk.
I look forward to that, Mark.
Thank you for all those posts.
All right, very good.
This is Britt.
Yes,
it's
Britt.
a good time. Some of you know I've been working on this project for about 17 years, which is how virtual election jurisdictions can actually move Congress. And it's taken a long time. We've worked through the essence of the transaction. And we're going to make that a little bit more public. I just didn't want to keep it a secret.
Okay. Your connection is a little spotty, Britt. So if you can get, closer to, whatever it is that you're using, or into a better signal spot, that would probably be great for us. So we have that teed up. Any other topics that we want to discuss today?
I think the roller coaster of democratized AI is a worthy discourse. It may be as fast a fall as it is a rise, but it certainly has an indelible transition, and we should discuss that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, Ben, Bruce, thank you so much.
And along those lines, if I can add,
yes,
I'm trying to go deeper and deeper into what causes all these reactions and all these things that we're seeing, which leads me into behavior, obviously, but which leads me into beliefs and mindsets and all this that underlie all these things that we share sometimes without knowing it. And that I'm very interested in learning more, because I'm interested in understanding how to change people's behavior, which means for me understanding how to change their beliefs, which the only way I've ever found is an aha or epiphany. But I'm definitely interested in anybody's thoughts about how to change people's beliefs and therefore behaviors more easily, because it's tough.
I think that's a good companion to what Ben and Bruce suggested. So that's great. So let's dive into Britt's topic. First, Britt, would you restate and kind of unpack what you are trying to communicate, and the discussion that you'd like to have with the PCI community?
I think we all agree that we need an agile democracy. We need our democracy to build new laws and change laws with the agility of the best tech companies. In 2012, Clay Shirky did a great talk called "How the Internet Will One Day Transform Democracy," and his point was that essentially lawmakers and programmers have the same workflow. They draft, edit, and manipulate blocks of arcane text, which when added to an existing code base has real effects in the real world. The difference is that politicians don't act that way. They go celebrate in the Rose Garden because I'm gonna have to screw that code again. But of course, programmers are instantly, what's going to break first? What's going to break second? What do we do next? And so that's been Clay's point. And my mission is to get that established by leveraging the incredible sensitivity politicians have about what their constituents think. Most people like to say, well, that's not true, but it turns out it's totally true.
Okay. So you teed up a few things, including, you know, a premise that some people may or may not agree with, that we need agile democracy, and that, I mean, there are clearly, I'll just point out that there are some things that the framers of the Constitution put in to slow things down. So at any rate, perhaps the speed of life and the decisions in front of us need to go either more agile or faster. But Britt, it's very interesting. Are you suggesting that agile democracy also requires technology enablement, or a change in, as Mark was talking, you know, relative to AI, you know, behavior, you know, change, or belief systems changed? You know, unpack that, and then let's open it up for discussion.
Well, first of all, the founders never anticipated that in 1929 we'd have the Apportionment Act, which froze the number of representatives to 435.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, they were representing 220,000 people. Now it's 760. And I'm convinced that the reason is that they only had 435 desks in the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
So that's what's driving us.
They also had to come by horse or train or something to, you know, to get there, and they had a long time, you know, between sessions, not necessarily instantly in touch with their constituencies the way we are today. So let's open it up. What
I'm sorry
up here.
to speak again. I just want to
Please go ahead, Mark.
generalize it. The to saying, what does democracy or representative democracy, or is this, have in common with software development and software, and how can we compare and contrast them and learn from each other with them? And it probably goes in two directions. So that you know, I'd like to broaden it in that sense, not just to say agile, but to say, how does it, what are the goods of both, and how do we get them to go cross context?
I think Clay Shirky's talk, it's worth looking up, how the internet will one day transform democracy. And he points out in there that generating a new form of arguing is one of the great things that can happen in society. Magna Carta, peer-reviewed journals, trial by jury, and now we have Git. You know, Linus Torvalds invented Git as a way of managing the kinds of conversations he'd been managing out of his email box for 15 years. And using a Git repository and the rules that the GitHub community has come up with, we actually have a very effective way of managing arguments, because democracy is argument. And they've improved it, and he points out chapter and verse, you know, with details like, here's the organizational structure of the IRS. Here's the organizational structure of Linux. You know, and obviously Linux is doing far more complicated things. But the real hope of this is part of a paper that I wrote with David Weinberger and Joe Trippi in 2009. And it was, you know, for the Digital Government Society in North America, who knew there was such a thing. And so the article was developing digital democracy through social networks. And the point is, we have to take it down to the scale of the congressional district, and then have people become more accustomed to meeting online in their virtual district than they are in real life. They don't know who their congressman is anyway, so it's just a help.
Yeah. Can you put your article into chat? Put a link so we can see it.
I think so.
Okay, and Amit, you have a thought. You said that agile is not the same as agility. You want to share more?
Sure. So I think you mentioned how can democracy be same as software development. So I've been working with Agile since its very inception, early 2000. So Agile meaning is being flexible. The meaning of agility is to adapt quickly as soon as possible. So they both are different. So let's not confuse the words, because a lot of people in the software industry they think that Agile is the same thing as agility, while it is not. And it's good to be agile. I think agile is good as operational and tactical work. And anything, if you try and extend agile beyond software development, it kind of fails, right? So flexibility is fine, but we need to be adaptive. How soon we can adapt to a changing world, that is what I call agility. So they both are different.
Now, I just might point out that the core word agile and agility are actually highly related to each other, but agile has become associated with a programming regimen in Scrum. So I understand, Amit, the difference that you're suggesting. Jim Spohr, you've put some comments into chat. Join us.
Yeah, just briefly. I've got a pet here as well, demanding attention. But yeah, I think some of you may know Lee Nachman. He was an IBM executive for years. I think he was also with Amazon and a couple other places, Microsoft perhaps as well. But he has a regular series of postings called Win-Win Democracy. And anything with a win-win in the title gets my interest, but he's really done a great series looking at a lot of things. And he's really, if you read his work, he really focuses on what causes polarization and how to have better arguments that lead to creative solutions to the challenges of our complex society and the polarization in our complex society. So I highly recommend Lee's work. So yeah, that'll be my resource.
I might point out that that's a good segue just to put in a plug for the next person who will be with us is Dave Snowden, who created the Cynefin framework, looking at the differences between things that are complex and other
complicated,
that are more confusing as it were. So he has a very interesting framework and was a former IBM research.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what he created was 20 years back. Things have changed now, and his framework has not changed. He's a great guy. I mean, he was at my last conferences, but personally, I feel it's 20 years old. We need to change. So I don't really buy his stuff anymore. Sorry, but that's my opinion.
Well, join in, and you can in 2 weeks, and you can make comments and challenge. He is doing some updating.
I don't want to argue with him, because some things are not to be argued. As simple as that.
All right. Well, it's interesting, the way he sees things. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to say the thought that the previous comment just raised in me was what would a political GitHub look like? What would a GitHub look like for politics? Would it be that communities could input their laws or their things or their ideas or their thoughts, and other people could withdraw them and build on them? Would, is there, could that be such a thing? Could that exist? That's would be interesting to think about.
Yes, it does. District of Columbia's laws are all on GitHub. That's how they update it.
Yeah.
They're on GitHub actually, but
Yeah.
what I'm talking about is the concept of GitHub, the concept of a GitHub for that just like programmers understand that there is useful code that they can draw from and use just as is, or they can modify on GitHub, and that it's all in one place, that the politicians might have the ability to say, oh, when we want to do a law, when we want to think about this, when we want to do this, it's all in one place. And we can just take it out and build on it. And if it works, it does. And if it doesn't, we can change it. I don't know. I mean, I'm just suggesting that's what
There is kind of a physical version of that today, Mark, and it's called K Street in Washington, D.C., because all of those. And so all of the either side, has all of the legislation, both at the state and federal level, and, the stuff from the EU and other spots. And they regularly, modify the language and say, here, you should introduce this bill, right? So anyway,
that's great, but that's US only, right? So
yeah, I understand, but the
so
fact is that there's a similar street in Brussels.
But yes, good point.
But I'm just saying it's not unprecedented, but it's captive to a small group of people as opposed to generally being open, right? And I think that you're trying to, talk about open. Others thoughts? We're going to keep this going for another 5 minutes, and we're going to go over to the other topic that was introduced by, let's see. So let's keep.
So I'll just add one more thing and close this out.
Yeah.
Okay. The woman who's missing from this conversation is named Heather Dahl. She's
Okay.
been very active in the identity world.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on a conference call with her 5 years ago, perhaps. And at that point, I said that it's amazing, but the views and opinions of 100 constituents out of 750,000 moves the needle in the office. So if you have a protocol where online, they get together, they come up with some ideas they want for a hearing that's coming up, which they know about through congress.gov, Library of Congress, fabulous API. And you say, we would like you to ask this question at the upcoming hearing. And they're going to say, well, we got 50 constituents want that. Are we going to not ask that question? And then the question has to do with something that's on the table, perhaps about net neutrality. How everybody likes Netflix more than Comcast. Anyway, so that's the point, and that can actually have an effect in a committee hearing. And I can provide you some data about that.
Yeah. So I might suggest that one of our PCI people is Marcy
Harris.
Yeah, so Marcy has been doing some work in this space. Malin, you've got your hand up. Please join us. Hope you enjoyed breakfast.
It would be useful to show you some of what we've been doing in Puerto Rico, because I've just come back from it. But here's one of the slides that
Hold on a second.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I just want to make sure you could share. There you go. You got it.
So this is one of the slides that part of our visit, just as background. Oops, no, that's share. Wrong. Stop. Get out. Slideshow. And it just seemed relevant to the conversation. PCI is launching the Puerto Rico Prosperity Initiative, and a team of us were down there for 2 weeks. And we're actually directly addressing this issue. And there'll be more to come, but I thought I should, since I'm here, let you know about this. So the US has announced essentially the largest industrial policy for a long time, and that's the Green Industrial Policy, which is the result of 3 acts: the CHIPS Act, the Jobs Infrastructure Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. And that's $514 billion over the next 10 years. And what we have proposed, and it's been taken up by the Department of Commerce, we're working closely with Census Bureau and NIST, is actually trying it out in Puerto Rico as a demonstration project. And our version of participatory democracy is that there is funding, there's legislation, there's policy, but what we need is participation by the people. And we're doing that actually using voice-enabled conversational AI. So this is a really interesting application of kind of almost the opposite of ChatGPT. And Yasha Stein, our new board member and chief strategy officer, will actually be meeting with Vint on Monday to go over the approach. And so just, it's a little sort of forewarning of what's happening within PCI. And those of you who want to get more involved can let me know. But we've had meetings with the Puerto Rico government, with the Lieutenant Governor, Don Graves, the Deputy Secretary for the Department of Commerce, said that he had never been so mind-aligned about a strategy as he is with what we're doing with PCI. So it's very exciting for us, and just letting you know.
Lynn, thanks for sharing that.
Where
And
do we say?
I'm sure that the folks in Puerto Rico, after a number of false starts and things that were actually not good, were delighted to see competent people show up, like you. So that's fantastic. So we're going to transition over to the topic. And by the way, Maylin, I think that Lynn was trying to get you to unpack that more fully in like in a month from now. So we welcome that, right? If it fits on your calendar, we'd love to hear more detail. Ben, unpack your topic again, and just spark our discussion about the AI.
Yeah, there is so many dimensions of recent activities and recent news from over the last year in the generative AI rise. It's a relationship to democratic action, the comparison with for many of us the 1995 as a democratization move that catalyzed so many different things as well, so many positive, and at the same time, our hype and overhype culture has led us to move from blockchain's the answer to metaverse is the answer to XYZ, and going further, that we're seeing the stumbling now of the generative AI in the LLM marketplace standpoint, and also the confounding issue in the art and visual standpoint of derivative work and other things like that, that are appropriate breaks, but against a wealth of opening opportunity, as many of us feel it. And it feels like 1995 again in opening things up. So I just thought we ought to consider that roller coaster and not go too far one way or the other on it, but make sure we take rational discourse. One last comment is that we focus, one of the things that is important to me is that it's awakened a notion of shifting away from programming and coding emphasis to prompting and quality prompting. And so I see that a skill of the Gen Z community is becoming good prompters. And it's a revelation of critical thinking that we celebrate. We keep saying that, as Steve Jobs said, we learn to code to learn to think. And it's a lot about a neglect of critical thinking that is needed and timely for this age. That prompting is going to be the poetry of the next decade.
All right, very good. And Mark, your topic was threaded in here. So before we get into
It
other
is.
comments, could jump in and say what you're trying to do in this space.
Well, I'm trying to figure stuff. So for example, there is there's a big meme now. It's going around in these discussions that somehow human thinking as we do it is better than brute force that ChatGPT used by looking forward and back in conversations and figuring that out. Well, that goes down to some beliefs, and that underneath that,
Well,
it may not be better, it may not be worse. Some people believe it's better, and we better go down to that level and start exploring things, because brute force sometimes works. We brute force when people break the law, we put them in jail. We have to really be deeper in terms of what we say coming out of what we believe, and those are so rarely articulated. I mean, this whole group called the people-centered internet is based on a belief that people, are somehow people should be taking care of themselves, or they're better than maybe something else. So we got to get to those. If we don't go deep enough into that level of what we really believe and how that affects what we do, then I think we're missing something, because other people will have different beliefs and we just won't agree.
Okay, so I would just put that under the rubric of unjustified assumptions from time to time. Maylin.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it actually boils down to what we decide to count and account for. And in fact, one of the major initiatives we're doing with Puerto Rico, with the Department of Commerce, is looking at what are the accounting systems that actually needed, because we've been so held hostage to the quarterly accounting system that we don't look at the longitudinal tracking of input, output, outcomes, impact. And that can take 3 months, it can take 3 years, it can take 30 years. Computers, of course, have the ability to track all of that in ways that don't require it to be put onto a single piece of paper. Douglas Engelbart said, we have to fly off the page. And we, in fact, can fly off the page, but we have decided not to do that. So the initiative in Puerto Rico is, in fact, to take the issue of digital cross-sector regulation.
¿Cómo está?
Muy bien, gracias. In a meeting.
I don't know who is. I'm going to see if I can
Brit, I think, no. Brit's
mute. Okay, we got it.
In
Got it.
Espanol.
So the idea of, every vertical, health, transportation, finance, they regulate in those silos because that's how it's been. That's the only way you could do it. But now all those regulations are, in fact, you can now see that they, in fact, integrate and need to be coordinated in terms of the impact on the person, on society, on a family, on a community. This brings up issues of the informal economy as well as the formal economy. And with IoT and other things, we can, in fact, track a lot more of the informal economy than has been tracked officially, say, in the Census Bureau or in other government dictated ways. So the experiment that we have proposed and has been accepted for being proposed for doing in Puerto Rico is called Digital Cross-Sector Regulatory Sandbox, that we would look at and prioritize the impact on equitable recovery and resilience in Puerto Rico, and prioritize that above the specific laws, rules, regulations, policies, and processes that governments are doing. This initiative is not new with people-centered internet. It's been done for the last 5 years by the World Bank and the ITU, the International Telecoms Union, and 12 countries have had it underway. And it's great to have it underway. You can read about it at digitalregulation.org. Yet no G7 country has stepped up to do that. And so with Puerto Rico, the United States has stepped up as the first G7 country to do that. And that's due to our initiative. And the first thing that we're doing is bringing in many ideas from accounting that have not been mainstreamed. Activity-based costing is somewhat mainstream, but it's not mainstream. There's impact accounting, climate accounting, sustainability accounting, all of which require this tracking over time. So you cannot solve these problems by silver bullets. And it, of course, discourse would want to do that because it's all you can do. But laying the foundation in the accounting system is what people-centered internet is driving.
And I'd like to, and that's fabulous. And I just want to, what flashed into my mind is when I went to Harvard Business School, the course that normally would be called accounting was called control. And so at the deeper level, this is really about control. And so what systems do we use? What do we do to get the results that we want? I think that's the way business looks at it, or did at some point. And I went 50 years ago, and but that's what I'm talking about, going to the underlying belief systems. If we see this as how we want to control things in certain ways and not so they don't go in other ways, and they work for the good of whatever we think is the good, we need to make sure that's clear on the table before we just do stuff.
And
So we're going to go.
As a former faculty member at HBS, I always point out to my accounting colleagues, there was never accounting at HBS. It was always control. It was always reflected in control. In fact, I was in the information systems group that was a special interest in the control area. And I celebrate that as well, because the historic record of focus on compliance and measures and metrics that are not necessarily performance-based. And that's why I look at adding to Maylin's commentary, the notion of continuous audit and continuous assessment is alien to the accounting world. Historic, which has episodic and annual audits and reviews and so forth. But in a world where complexity doesn't matter, that we can rethink those challenges, and it is much less about the reporting.
Yeah. So we're going to go to Doug Houlihan in a second. I'll just add that accounting also does very poorly in terms of evaluation of goodwill and intangibles, which is an increasingly part of our economy.
And ethics
Doug.
and empathy as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, first of all, I'm a big believer in control, that an ethical human needs to be in control and in the loop. And that's what people-centered internet's all about, right? I guess second is, there's now a new statistic out there that only 6% of people think, I think it's 6, that AI is going to be more benefit than not. And like half the people, think it's going to be doing more harm than good. A friend of mine told me about when I was doing working on automated vehicle technology, reminded me of the Magnificent Anderson's novel written in 1918 about the rise of the car, right? And, automobiles are a useless nuisance, never amounts to anything but a nuisance. We have no business to be invented. Throughout history, the automobile, people were scared of electricity, people were scared of the internet, and in some ways, rightly so, right? Because there can be a lot of harm done because of these, but there can be a lot of benefit. And so, I'm a believer that you need to understand how to use a tool. If a tool is powerful, you need to learn how to use it, or someone else will learn how to use it that may have, especially if you're ethical, right? Ethical people need to get in and understand how to use these tools, to use them for ethical ways, so that the evil people, if you step away and just let the Wild West go in, it's going to be more dangerous. And these are the challenges. So I'm a big believer in understand the technology, understand the risks and the benefits, and how to be ethical on it and people-centered. So these are the things I would say. Now, with that said, I don't have a TikTok account, and I never plan to have a TikTok account. So there are things I don't, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. So I do understand the balance of that, but I think generative AI is something to more learn and see the benefit than the fear.
Okay. Britt, you put some comments in chat. Join us again.
Just a couple of links, and I'll try to get some other papers in there. Is there a follow-up form? Should I just put that on Medium? Not sure how to reach this group.
I'm sorry, what are you asking for?
Is there a possibility of getting emails for this group? I could put an article on Medium, a compilation of things.
We just have a distribution. So if you put it in,
Okay.
in here, that's where it'll go. Rob Pye, you had some comments in chat. Please join us.
Forgive me, I just stepped away for a second there to put a jumper on. It's chilling out in the UK at the moment. Nothing more than I said really on the chat, and it's back to technology and democracy. I think you have to kind of, we're never talking about technology, kind of the underlying governance, ownership, IP, who writes the code. You know, the issue of technology is kind of sweeping without kind of looking at, are we talking about a tech sociology of open source, the relationship between, you know, the community of people that would develop the code, maintain it, create policies, create governance. So, you know, we sort of sweeping statement talk about tech, don't we? But we need to unpick that quite a lot.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. And we're glad you're warmer now.
I've got my cashmere on.
All right. Well, that's good. High quality warmth. We like it. So Jim Spoor, you put some new comments in. Join us again.
Yeah, I'm just reading the comments and researching them. So I like to read some fiction stuff as well. So thanks, Doug, for that pointer. Looks kind of interesting.
What was the reference?
To the Magnificent Ambersons. It was about a time of change and
Okay.
you know, going from the old aristocracy to the new aristocracy. And I think we are in an adjustment period and continuous adjustment period in some ways, but certainly with AI, we're in an adjustment period. It's going to take decades, I think, for a lot of the technical challenges with AI and social challenges to be worked out, but it's interesting. I think, you know, probably everybody follows Gary Marcus and Ernie Davis for some really good information about the harms of AI and social harms and things like that. And I think it's, you know, we want to be aware of the potential harms. Stephen Wolfram, and I'll put some of these references in the chat. Stephen Wolfram has really come out with what I think is the most concise and clear description of how these technologies, you know, general purpose transformers work. So I'll put that in. So I think we have to understand more. We have to understand certainly the benefits. And I think, you know, Mark Prensky's work and a lot of other people, you know, I can see the benefits for sure if we can make our way through the adjustment period. But we also have to be aware there's harms along the way in the adjustment period, and we need to have a deeper technical understanding of these things. So
yeah.
That's my
speaking
perspective.
Of fiction, you know, I would really like to have, I would like to have had when I was learning the you know, the learning companion that was describing the Diamond Age, right? You know, the person
Absolutely.
who, you know, the system that was adaptive to me and was giving me what I needed in the moment, as opposed to a, you know, standard lesson course, right? The remarkable young lady that is in the book, who wasn't supposed to have it because she wasn't an elite, you know, it ended up, you know, a street person. You know, she became a remarkable person because her need set was completely different than the elites, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So I love
for
that.
people who haven't read the book Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson, it's fantastic. And this father, very wealthy father, creates the perfect primer for his little daughter, but the genius who made it kept a secret copy which got lost and shows up in a slum in China, and a young poor girl gets it, and of course she takes off, and this very wealthy person has it as well. So it's interesting how the lives converge in the future. So it's
Yeah.
quite a good read.
It is. I mean, it was one of my favorites. So I hope that what we're, that we're seeing the early stages of being able to have those kinds of learning companions, right?
Yeah, and I did put in the chat, there's a number of threads, but I look at the people who write about the harms, I read the people who write about the technology, and the people who write about the benefits, and try to sort through all those. And there's some, actually the very first one there, if you're not familiar with Ethan Mollick's, he's just a get in there, use it professor at Wharton. But his most recent post talks about, he was skeptical how soon things would happen, but he's becoming less skeptical that we're kind of on an acceleration curve because of AI. So that was a very interesting read. I think that just came out this morning.
Nick Bostrom's Superintelligence is worth rereading too, because he was talking about it from a philosophy point of view, not from a tech point of view. Okay.
Yeah. And to actually just on that point, to Mark Prensky's earlier point about people-centered, chapter 13 of Nick Bostrom's book talks about superintelligence may lead to super ethical. Like we may think we're ethical, but it could be that there's super ethical. And so chapter 13 explores that in Nick Bostrom's book. It's quite good.
100%. Okay. Malin, were you trying to get back in the conversation? I wasn't sure. Okay. I wasn't sure whether I was reading it right. Okay. So Mark, how are we doing in terms of navigating your belief notion here? You've got your hand up. I also wanted to say,
I put it in the chat. It's just, it's hard for me not to see this as human evolution. And it's hard for me not to see this as, okay, human evolution biologically took billions of years. We all know that. Human evolution technologically or digitally is going to be 1 billion times faster. And that's, we forget what ChatGPT 1.0 does. We need to be looking at what GPT, version 100 does, because that's going to be with us in 5 years or 10 years. And so to my mind, if we just look at this stuff as tools, we are really missing a deep, deep, deep point, which is that these are new parts of us. Now, they're not everybody yet, but they will be. The most of the world now, or a lot of the world now, has smartphones much faster than anybody thought they ever would. And so this stuff is going to spread and be human. And so I think it's a real mistake to say, well, do I want to use this tool? Don't I want to use this tool? Doug, do you want to be on TikTok? Don't you want to be on TikTok? This stuff is a part of us. And you just say, okay, I don't want it. We can do that as humans. We can reject stuff, but it's like rejecting, foods, or it's like rejecting culture, or it's like rejecting a lot of things that we still have whole groups that still do that. We still have groups that live like they did in the Stone Age somewhere, but those, we consider those not contemporary humans, but old groups. And what is contemporary human is what is changing. I don't even want to say changing anymore. I just say evolving. And if you can decide whether you want to evolve too.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to go to Doug next. Is trying to mimic human intelligence it's kind of a new kind of intelligence, and so you want to harness what it's capable of doing well. Hello, Doug.
Yeah. One comment: there's 1.3 billion school-aged children in the planet, and so in 2018, People Labs talked about what is the near future of education, and I'll put this in the chat. And they had this 10-year-old girl giving what they thought is the vision of it, which is holograms, AI assistant that would give them information. So you have basically a personal tutor to give you the information when you need it. And actually they did a 10G challenge. We won actually the Learn category with the KU School of Nursing. But my goal this year is to get, and I've been talking to Cable about this, is to get that 10-year-old girl, now that she's about 15, to what is the now future of with education. So, and with generative AI, with holograms, and with XR technology. And there's actually a panel coming up in April. And so my goal is to have a panel that talks about the now future of education with this technology. So we'll see if it happens.
What's preventing that from scaling, Doug?
What's permitting it? The cost of devices, the ability to connect to the internet and the cloud. And just so again, I go back to the internet.org. They talk about you need access to connect to the internet, access, affordability, relevance, and readiness. So, you know, those 4 things have to be in place for people to engage with this. I think, you know, one of my goals I'm giving talks a lot on generative AI is to help them understand, why is this relevant to your life? You know, because if they don't feel it's relevant, then they're not going to learn, right? And then how do you get, once you know what you think is relevant, then how do you get the readiness so that you can use these tools? So this is my belief system. So anyway, I'll put the links of the videos that are from Cable Labs.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Frank, your hand's up.
Yeah, I've been involved with education and how the internet, et cetera, and the evolving tools can evolve into best practices, highest learning with least amount of time. And Mr. Vivaldi, Eric, spoke a couple weeks ago and mentioned that what we're working toward is the adoption of digital culture. And well, that's all over the place. And certainly this group is moving forward. Gary Bowles is way out in front with the workforce economy. But there's a lot of people that are being left behind that are elected leaders and so forth. I mean, really, there's so many wonderful things going on. I posted today a link to a 20-minute overview of how all these tools fit together. And there are some really fascinating aspects related to education. Like I can have a digital twin and send an essay of mine, and I can then see myself present that essay within seconds, as opposed to sitting in front of a video camera, having to do it in the old-timey way. I was in a Usenet group in 1987 on electronic democracy and was very excited about being there, and printed a 77-page report of the interactions. That's when people's interaction was long form rather than 3-line texts. Anyway, this video that I posted has a couple other short videos as examples of how terribly wrong it's already shown itself to be. But there are 2 things I want to throw out briefly that fascinate me with AI. Could I load all my hundreds of essays into the chat program, and then have people interact with my body of knowledge created over these years? My mentor wanted to have his gravestone have a button that would say, "Hi, this is Dave, want to chat?" We're really pretty close to being able to do something like that. I find that absolutely fascinating. And the other is the examples in this 20-minute video that I hope some of you who are interested will be able to view, because it turns the tables on what individuals are able to do. It also begs the question of what is basic digital literacy for inclusion and equity. We're going to be spending billions on connectivity, physical connectivity. We're not really spending much on what Mei Lin mentioned, which is that end impact that needs ongoing data and to be able to measure what skill set is most valuable and can most quickly be delivered versus the old style, which would be what? PowerPoint and Zoom. Anyway, enough from me, but I hope you'll take a look at those videos I posted, because I've been involved with AI for all of 3 weeks, and what I've discovered pretty much blows me away. So thank you.
Frank. Thank you. I'll put a link into a company that's doing work in the space, that you're talking about, all your knowledge and having a, representative, all right, to be able to interact with, who Frank is. I mean, it's the silver tsunami problem that people are beginning to, depart, organizations in droves. They have a lot of information, a lot of wisdom, and can you capture it as opposed to that, that person just walking out the door and not knowing what they knew anymore. In fact, that's pretty good for families. Why don't you have a digital inheritance that you're going to give the next generation of people? So anyway, it's happening. So it's a good thought.
There is somebody who's created something called digital dinner parties with history. So they do this with historical people. So you can sit around the dinner table, theoretically, with this. It's easier
Yeah.
with people from today, but you can do it with Plato and just put all his writings in and we can have a dinner conversation.
Yeah. Ben, jump back in. You had some thoughts in chat.
No, I'm just enjoying commenting
Okay.
along the pathway. But I guess one of the main points to me was the kind of record that we look at universal, but these are perspective, and they're maybe much more individual knowledge sets. And I like that story of a young lady who took her journals from her youth and put them in GPT from all her stages of growth, and diaries and so forth, in with the purpose of having conversations with her younger self, her evolving self, because it would be at different stages. And so we tend to look on it from a shared knowledge standpoint, but it can be very personalized and compartmentalized as well. That has to be a part of our discourse.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Doug, you had some more comments? And then Mark.
Oh, that's just a comment. That's just
Comments.
that's just saying I like what Ben just said. That was my thumb up.
Thank you. Okay. Doug?
Yeah, same here. Just putting some, I guess maybe one comment I would say is, I worked 4 or 5 years on automated vehicle technology. And, people, when Tesla came out, I put in the chat of some guy, 2 people playing cards, playing the ukulele, not paying attention to the road, right? And, while level 2 technology makes a safer road system, if you're using technology appropriately, it will be much more dangerous if you don't. So
that's exactly what the Tesla recall is about right now.
Yeah,
they're going to
exactly.
reprogram the self-driving stuff because, it's going to put in some bumpers inside the car and say, you need to pay attention to me.
Well, actually in Europe, they have driving monitor systems. So you have a camera. So if you're not paying attention, it yells at you. Actually, my grandfather, when he drove, my grandmother would yell at him. She would say, mind your business, Alf, all the time. If she didn't feel like he was paying enough attention to the road.
Yeah.
So
But my sense is that if Musk were here, he would argue that if everybody in the world were using that technology, and maybe with the patch that he's about to put on it, and if everybody were using, we would have infinitely fewer accidents than we do when we just let people drive.
And I agree, but that's not the world we live in. So you have to live within the world.
But it will be in 20 years. That's the point. Everything is really, that's one of the things about speeding up these days, is that we think that the world in 20 years will be linear 20 years, as it always has been, but it will be exponential 20 years. And that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Well, right now, 5% of the drivers cause 90% of the accidents. So, we all think we're good drivers, but there's a lot of, so bottom line is, one aspect is getting the bad drivers off the road, or especially the drunk or distracted or doing drug drive or speed drivers, but that's not the world we live in the United States. So,
today.
I raised
Absolutely. This goes way back to what I'm saying, that the world we live in today, you're absolutely right. And the education system we have today, that's the same in the whole world. Absolutely. And if we just left those alone, they would evolve and go wherever they're going. But that's not the way the world is changed now. The world is now moving exponentially in every area. And so for me, anyway, that's my perspective on this.
We tend to continue to focus on fixing the 20th century when instead of taking a 21st century perspective and pull ourselves into the 21st century, we're trying to push ourselves from the 20th all too often. The issue is about transportation and transporting people and transporting things, and not vehicle structure and vehicle ownership and vehicle control. And yet we're preoccupied with fixing the 20th century.
Yeah. I recently, was watching a thread that said, well, at Twitter, Elon has suggested that, his programmers, promote his tweets, all right, and give it higher priority. And the jump was, well, what does that mean if you get a Neuralink? All right, is he going to be promoting his ideas into your head? All right, so be careful of what you implant into your brain, right? So with that, Jim, you had some thoughts in chat. Join us again.
Yeah, just this concept of a responsible actor,
yes,
is really learning to invest is what I'm focused on these days. So I try to think of like, what is the litmus test for being responsible, and what is the litmus test for being irresponsible? And it's just a thought experiment, but if you could literally rewind, like in a video game, if you could rewind everything, so, irresponsibility didn't kill people, or if it did, you could rewind it and boom, they're alive again. Then our notion of responsible actor would change. But unfortunately, since we can't rewind harm, we have to be responsible and try to, even if we know there's something great out there, like I think Mark Prensky sees that great thing out there, he wants to get to it. But there's some of us who are like, well, okay, Mark, but cool your jets a little, because how many people are going to be destroyed along the way? And something that looks good, like the automobile, can look bad in the future because there's unintended consequences. So I think this notion of how do I think all of us here on this call are respectful, trying to be responsible actors, learning to invest in getting to a better future. But how do we learn to invest in a responsible way? That's my last words, Kevin, for today.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Rob, you got back in chat. Any thoughts you want to share with us? And
just a comment. Again, contextualizing, the enormous growth, change, against things that we're not thinking of at the moment that are not techno-social, and just the sort of the backdrop of we're 172 trillion off the UN's sustainability development goals, just 12 months on. We're miles away from 1.5 degree Paris climate change. I don't know if is the comms working? Can you hear me?
yes.
Yeah. So I think it's an impossible task to kind of wind the clock forward. But I love Jim's magnificent thought about responsibility, and that I think that could give us all pause about what that might look like. And of course, you can only kind of, with the benefit of hindsight, understand what that is. But it's worth thinking an awful lot about, I think, because we're not doing a good job at the moment.
Well, we can certainly, there's a small group of people are paying a lot of attention to this, but they're not getting as much attention as they should. Amit, you had some thoughts. I went back and scrolled back and saw that you participated. So we'd love to hear from you again.
No, I just wanted to say, you know, somebody said responsibility. So I was saying, why not accountability? You can still be responsible, but yet not accountable. So we should all be accountable, I guess. That's what I wanted to say.
So it's responsible with a measurement or with a known outcome. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Okay, outstanding. In fact, I was just writing a proposal this morning about management system, and that was one of the key components, right? So is roles without the right kind of outcomes or delegation. Okay. I'm seeing Ben. We're coming to the we're into overtime now, guys. All right, so we're going to arc back to 1 o'clock for those who want to stay with us. For those of you who need to depart, you have our thanks for being on our call today. So on to overtime. Ben?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo this the thought going forward of notions of critical thinking and evolution. I think several people put in the issue in the chat about education, and certainly I feel that the institutions we create to facilitate are often impediments down the road. As we build airports for transit, and yet we make it very hard to get to the airports and from the airports as well for transportation. Our education, which was a needed facilitation in prior centuries to bring development to communities that would not otherwise have it, are now sometimes an impediment for individuals that have other personal development activities. The notion of a guardian angel and independent doppelganger that has a quantum an equilibrium with ourselves, that is a partner and coach and guide for education, that there are new possibilities of thinking about personal development and personal engagement that raise questions about the way we're approaching things like education and medicine. I think is clearly a venue that needs disruption.
Okay. Frank, I see your hand up, but I want to ask a question of a person who's with us. Coco, are you there? Coco Morindi? Hi, Coco. So we're talking about generative AI and ChatGPT. Is this a big deal where you are? You're over in Africa, right? Is this a topic, or is this not getting any visibility? Because it could be just a phenomenon that we're experiencing. You tell us. We can't hear you. I can't hear you, sir. Nope.
He's trying to get off mute, but I don't see the mute button.
He did come
Kevin,
off
maybe
mute, but his microphone isn't doing what it's supposed to do.
Ah.
Coco, maybe if you drop off and rejoin, you can offer some comments. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll go to Frank while Coco's rejoining us. Frank?
Personally, what fascinates me about AI is I'd like Alexa to shut up with pushing sales of products that I've ordered previously and be able to say, Alexa, make rule. When I say this, do this, and be able to expand a personal assistance to aid my education as a teacher of teachers of teachers. To me, that makes a lot of sense. Also, if Coco's clientele in Africa have an AI assistant that is guided in the right direction, unlike most of what we have today, how could it accelerate the overall understanding, particularly if these people are not on the internet live, but have some type of a standalone learning assistant. You
Mm,
know, Alexa, I forgot what you told me yesterday, or this is what I want to learn more about. And it would do a search, and Chat GPT put together an itinerary and keep the itinerary to only 5 minutes, so that we could guide the amount of time we spend instead of the hours and hours we all spend searching, sifting, reading, and trying to pay attention to videos that are always too slow. So that's my 2 cents. I think, you know, there's a top down and there's a bottom up, and I'm all about the bottom up. What's the best the grassroots can learn to benefit from this? And that's my bailiwick: rural, remote, and indigenous. Thank you.
yeah, I just wanted to let you know that Alexa did try to answer you, all right, in the other room. You know, you were speaking loud enough that she responded, all right, so that's interesting.
Can I just say that it's all good that we do that we make these rules for ourselves, but as things evolve, that prevents us often from changing or things from coming in. And I use the example of my mother, who had her rules. Under my roof, you will do this. And boy, that really sucked as my life changed. And that's, you know, be very careful of the rules you make for yourself, especially when you don't know the underlying belief systems behind those rules very well.
Same thing applies for selection of software, Mark, because what you're doing is you're buying, you know, pre-coded decisions,
Yeah.
right? And so you're buying into that form of reality. So you need to know how it works, right, before you decide that that's, you know, you want to live inside that system.
It's certainly useful. Do I want a spell checker? Do I want a truth checker? Do I want a this? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we did some research that's on voice systems, and realized that one, businesses don't use them because they don't trust that the conversation they're having is only inside the company, right? So, you know, it's kind of like, oh, we're transmitting, and it's like putting a microphone and we're broadcasting the outside world. Second is that all of these voice assistants, whether it's Google or, you know, Amazon, don't have access to your knowledge base, right? So if you say, hey, how much did we sell in Brazil last month? It's not going to be like the computer on Star Trek. It doesn't know, because it can't get to, you know, what, you know, is inside the company. So for it to function that way, we're going to have to get some enterprise class, you know.
What year was Star Trek set in, the first Star Trek?
Was it
2077 or something? It wasn't that far in the future.
Well, I know, but I'm thinking that, you know, the first Star Trek on NBC was 1968.
That's when it came on, but when he said star date, whatever it was,
yeah, I don't know.
was the
It
star
was,
date?
it was in the 25th century, but Jetsons was 100 years, so 2062.
Yeah.
And that means
George was
that
born in
that means that
2022.
George Jetson was born last year.
Exactly. So, Coco, you got back. Can we hear you? I can't hear Coco. I can see Coco, but we can't hear Coco. So Coco, if you have some thoughts for us, type into chat. Okay, we're interested in what's happening in your part of the world. It's likely rolling out differently, or, you know, it's being perceived, you know, differently, and I think that's interesting. Okay. Bruce, we haven't heard from you, so I'm gonna call on you. You know, what have you heard so far that is sparking your imagination or your thinking?
Well, you know, I'm just sitting here listening, as you can tell, but I think that the conversation that is ongoing here is so important to trying to discover what the real underlying problems are that face that we as a country and as a world are confronting. And I just think it's outstanding to listen to people that are on this call, because it's a contribution that's, I believe, is to be incredibly important. And there are no answers here, but there are thoughts. And from those
Mm.
thoughts, we create solutions. But without the thoughts, we get nowhere. And so I'm just very, very appreciative of everybody's input, because we have to discover where the underlying problems lie, and it affects every single segment of our world. So I just want to thank everybody for that contribution.
Well, thanks, Bruce. We appreciate it. We generative AI, this is a generative slice of humanity here, right? Barry, thank you for putting your thumb up. Mark, you were raising your hand to talk.
Oh, I need to leave, but I want to stay.
Well,
because I
appreciate
loved
you
it.
being with us.
I just agreed with what everybody said. I love this conversation. Great people, great thoughts. I'm happy to have individual conversations with everybody. Thank you for doing this. Thank you, Kevin, so much for moderating it. As they say, this is let's do more of them. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
2 weeks, we'll be back. All right. Barry, do you want to, we haven't heard from you. You want to share some thoughts about what you heard today?
Just want to say I'm enjoying the conversation. It's really interesting. I've been looking at issues about innovation over an extended period of time and thinking about how there's been a lot of fear of innovation over the centuries, and it often shuts things down, or has been. And we're all at the leading edge. We're thinking about adopting, taking things quickly, but there's a huge body of people who get left behind or get hurt by some of the things that happen. And I don't know how to assemble those things, put them together. I'm a fairly deep introvert, and so I spend a lot of time after these meetings thinking about stuff. And I really appreciate the fodder that comes out of sitting and listening to all of you. So thank you.
Well, thank you for being a great participant as a listener. We're glad that you were with us today. Doug.
Yeah. Sorry, am I on? Yeah. Sorry about that. I was trying to save the chat. Yeah, one comment I was going to have is I have a friend that works at a bank. He does works in kind of fraud in machine learning and data science. And so I was trying to come up with 10 things that generative AI can do for this, and summarize the company, summarize the department, what are some things they can do, and so forth. And then I started saying, okay, list the people who work at this bank that work in machine learning and data science. And then it gives me that list, and I say, okay, tell me something about these projects and stuff. And it's just dawning on me is like, wow, if I was a spy, what would take years to generate, you can do in minutes. I don't know where this is going, but this is a tool that just has amazing ability. One of my favorite books is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein, about this computer that comes alive. And this Chat GPT, generative AI, is not a person, it's a tool. But it is scary in some ways what this technology can do, and it can be used for great harm if not used properly. So this will be the challenge of this year and this decade, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't ever expect COVID to be the interruption that was. So, Mother Nature could also throw a wrench in our attention. So I'm just pointing out that, let's not forget all the other things that could potentially be interesting human attention grabbers.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about nuclear war right now than I am about AI personally.
Well, so like I said, that's an attention grabber.
Yeah.
But maybe you could apply that intelligence, this new intelligence, to doing negotiations faster.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that we are close to exhausting ourselves with the group that's left. So I'm just going to go around. Ben, you're gonna, close us off. Frank, any thoughts before we finish up?
Billions are being spent on physical connectivity, nothing really towards smart training. I read that broadband, the clouds will part and the angels will sing once you have it. The list of negatives and dangers is extensive. And I'm not hearing that from people that are trying to get billions for inclusion and equity. And I see billions being wasted, but also a lot of good people really turned off when they get online, begin to feel empowered, and then get scammed, hacked, or screwed over.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
Okay, Frank, thanks so much.
Thank
Ben,
you.
bring us home. Yeah, but Bruce, are you trying to say something before we finished up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Bruce, were you trying to say something?
No, I'm just listening. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead. Ben, go ahead. Take us
Yeah, I
home.
wanted to follow up a point on, first of all, the pursuit of context is sort of perennial, that we've seen at different stages. Content, we focus on content. If you recall, the old content is king. I used to say if content was king, then context was emperor. And that we're always in, the winners in these markets have been contextual. Those that bring information and context to you, though the winners have always in our cycles for 50 years now. If we think that way, we focus more on the engagement than just the knowledge base. And how you think is more important than what you know on it. But I was reflecting on Doug's comment earlier. I studied Russian in high school and college, and traveled as one of the early computer scientists traveling in the Soviet Union a number of times. And we always ask on the American side from CIA and FBI and others about the computing technology. Well, the computing technology in the Soviet Union was the best computing technology was stolen from the West for the most part, except for Minsk, which dealt with small computers before small computers were big here in the States and so forth. But one of the things we found that the culture attitudes were different. The winners in the Soviet espionage domain were people that brought content back, and everything was treated as valuable until it was proven not. And the Western attitude was complete opposite. Everything was garbage until it was proven valuable. So we had different kinds of filters associated with that. One of the deputy heads of the CIA, when talking with him, I asked him what he wanted to know about Soviet computing, and he said a brilliant thing. He said, "I want to know what they want to know. More than anything, I want to know what they want to know." And often we find that exploration, we make assumptions about knowledge, assumptions about knowledge use. And if we're dealing with interacting systems, we need to wear that hat and try to understand their pursuit and their decision processes. Other than that, and that's true about systems as well as people.
Yeah. Well, I would say that and just to finish off what you were saying, is that the reason that everything was valuable coming back there, it's the same thing in like the store shelves in North Korea, is that when there's nothing on the shelf, everything that shows up is valuable. All right. When you're living in abundance, all right, you're trying to filter for what's important. So we're in the stage where we're living in that abundance, right? At least in terms of the speed at which this tech is, showering gifts on us. So with that, thanks for a robust conversation for our open mic today. And as I said, Dave Snowden will be with us in 2 weeks, and Mei Lin, I believe, will be on the calendar this third week in March. So we have some great topics coming up, and thanks for being with us today. Cheers.